This is a lesson on pronunciation. Pronunciation is something I love teaching in Spanish because it doesn't take a lot to really step up your pronunciation, and it obviously completely changes the way that you sound. The start is vowels. So if you can get your vowels down, you have a really good foundation. In Spanish, most every letter is usually sounded out. So it's important that you know very clearly how each letter sounds. So let's start with the vowels, and I like to kind of talk about specifics with each one and sort of the formation of your mouth, where your tongue goes, and how this is different from English. So first we have A, which sounds like ah. I tell my students that this is like the sound that you make at the dentist. Say ah, ah. So you're dropping your jaw when you make the A sound. Ah. E is this sound where you, if it's exaggerated, you show your bottom teeth. Eh, eh. I is sort of a fake smile. E. So we have ah, eh, e. Then we have o. You need to make a small circle with your lips. O. And then you use that same small circle, but it goes a little bit higher. Ooh. So let's start from the top. We have ah, e, I, o, u. Here's some other unique sounds in Spanish. We have the H, which is silent. For example, my name is Hannah, but you would just pronounce it Anna. So the H's are silent. And then we have J, which makes what we think of in English as an H sound. So words like jalapeno. The double L makes a Y sound, como te llamas, unless you're Argentinian, and then it's sort of a j sound, como te llamas. The T, this is not a dramatically different sound, but I think that pronouncing the T correctly really steps up your pronunciation in Spanish. So in English, we really throw out our sound, so the T is kind of t. When I make the T sound in English, the tip of my tongue is tapping the roof of my mouth, and then I'm kind of blowing air out. T. But in Spanish, my tongue is flattening on the roof of my mouth and it's touching my two front teeth. T. T. It's like a word, tomar, tomar, and not tomar, tomar. And then we have the double R, which is where you would roll your R in a word like perro. If you can't roll your R, then you want the tongue to still roll a little bit and for the sound to come a little farther back than a R sound. Because in English, a lot of the sound is coming from the front of our mouth, the R, but we want it to come from a further place. You can almost start with making a DR, 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 and work from there and see if you can get the sound to come from deeper. Let's practice each vowel. I'll give you a second on your own to maybe say each one out loud, then I'll say it, and then you can try to say it again. To practice pronunciation, we've talked about linguistic research. You have to speak, right? We learn to speak by speaking. We learn to listen by listening, so on and so forth. So you've got to say it out loud. All right. What's the first one? Casa. papa, gato. You hear in this last one the T. It's not gato, gato. Perro. You have to get those R's kind of back there. Perro. Tren. Here we're flattening the T and we're putting an R after it. And it almost is like a roll with a TH sound. Tren. Escuela. All right. Bicicleta. Bicicleta. Amigo. Cine. We have the O. Remember, it's the O sound, the small circle. Sol. Coche. Comida. U sound. Luna. Juguete. Azul. Now let's talk about accents. The accent is the part of the word that I like to think of it visually as you kind of go up with it. So we have árbol. It's not árbol, right? That would be the accent on the O. It's árbol. Cámara. Cámara. Fácil. Música. Rápido. Último. Técnico. Lápiz. México. Ángel. Canción. Dólar. Índice. Público. Físico. Okay, great. Hopefully you were able to practice those with me. Of course, feel free to go back and practice again. We're going to go into some longer words, and these are a good example of how you just need to break the word apart and make sure you sound out every single letter. Try this first one. Periódico. 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 Líquido. Práctica. Ácido. Réplica. Ópera. Médico. Públicamente. Íntimo. Difícilmente. Universidad. Celebre. Trágico. Póliza. Tramite. Great. Again, go back and practice those a second time if that would be helpful for you. Now we're going to move on to these little poems. As opposed to English, Spanish is a language that connects. So in English, our words and our sentences are very staccato. If you've never heard an example of someone imitating what English sounds like to a non-English speaker, that's something you should look up because it's very interesting. And English has this very separate staccato sound, whereas Spanish, amongst other Romance languages, is much more connected. There's more flow. And it's important to practice that so that your pronunciation sounds more natural. I'll read this first sentence and then I'll give you a second to try it on your own. El sol brilla en el cielo azul. El sol brilla en el cielo azul. Let's try the second sentence. Las flores bailan con la suave brisa. Las flores bailan con la suave brisa. Disfruto de este hermoso día de verano. Great. I'll try the whole thing and then you can pause and try it yourself. El sol brilla en el cielo azul. Las flores bailan con la suave brisa. Disfruto de este hermoso día de verano. Now let's try some simple sentences. These are either common sentences that you might hear or okay, here are some simple sentences in Spanish. Hola, ¿cómo estás? Estoy bien, gracias. Me llamo Ana. ¿De dónde eres? ¿Qué hora es? ¿Dónde vives? Okay, and here are some tongue twisters, trabalenguas. These are really fun to practice. So maybe take a screenshot of this if it's something that you want to practice on your own. And that is all for pronunciation today.